She laughed when she saw him in boots and cement, a simple bricklayer. But he was the CEO who owned everything there, and he heard every word. The next morning, he came back with a shocking proposal. What he did in front of everyone changed her destiny. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us from which city you're watching us. We continue. The alarm went off at 6 a.m. as usual. The first rays of sunlight could barely penetrate through the cracks in the blinds of the small apartment. Clara Rinaldi opened her eyes, staring at the same white ceiling she saw every day. 32 years old, graduated in business administration, and completely stuck in a routine that consumed her without offering anything in return. One more day, she whispered to herself as she turned off the alarm. Her morning routine was always the same. A quick shower, strong coffee without sugar, modest formal wear, and the bus ride to the accounting office where she had worked for 7 years. The same streets, the same faces on public transport, the same feeling that life was passing her by while she just watched. Clara arrived at the company promptly at 8 a.m. The office building in downtown Rio was nothing special, just like her, job organizing spreadsheets and serving customers who barely remembered her name. She sat down at her desk and turned on the computer, preparing herself for another 8 hours of mechanical existence. "Good morning, Carol," exclaimed Deborah, her co-worker and the closest person she could call a friend in that environment. "Ready for another exciting week of fiscal reports?" Clara forced a smile. "I couldn't be more excited." During lunch, Deborah kept talking about the renovations taking place in the building next door to the office. A large construction company was revitalizing a historic building, transforming it into a modern office complex. They say that the construction company Horizonte is investing millions in this project. It's the company of that young businessman, Matthias Anders, who always appears in business magazines, commented Deborah while eating her salad. Clara just nodded. Not really. Paying attention. What did she care about the ventures of millionaires? Her reality was quite different. Deep down, however, she couldn't help but feel a pang of envy towards people who seemed to have a purpose, a passion for something. As she returned to the office after lunch, Clara noticed an unusual movement near the construction site. A group of workers were chatting animatedly as they worked on the facade of the building. Among them, one man in particular caught her attention. Unlike the others, he seemed older, perhaps in his 40s, with grey hair at his temples and a stubble that gave him a distinguished air, even in his simple uniform and helmet. The man's focused expression, the way he guided others with natural calm, conveyed a confidence that Clara could not explain. For a brief moment their eyes met, and she felt a slight embarrassment at being caught watching. The man smiled discreetly before returning to work. That night, lying in bed, Clara found herself thinking about that worker. There was something different about him, something that stood out from the environment around him, as if he didn't completely belong there. It was just a fleeting impression, but enough to break the monotony of her usual thoughts. In the following days, Clara began to purposely choose to pass by the construction site during her lunch break, hoping to see the mysterious man again. It was on Wednesday that she found him again, this time alone, apparently checking some measurements with a tape measure. "Good job," Clara said, surprising herself with the initiative. Normally, she wasn't one to strike up conversations with strangers. The man looked up, recognizing her instantly. "Thank you. You work nearby, don't you? I've seen you pass by a few times." "Yes, at the accounting office across the street," she replied, feeling strangely nervous. "My name is Clara." "Nice to meet you, Clara. I'm Victor," he replied, extending his calloused hand to shake, foreman of this project. Victor's rough hands contrasted with his articulate speech and discerning gaze. Clara noticed that despite his simple clothes and manual labor, there was a certain elegance in his gestures and words. "It's an interesting project," she said, trying to prolong the conversation. "This building has been abandoned for so long." "And it deserves to be brought back to life," Victor added with genuine passion in his voice. "This building has history. It has soul. Buildings like this are not built anymore these days." The way he talked about architecture and construction impressed Clara. It wasn't the kind of conversation she expected to have with a construction foreman, but something about the man piqued her curiosity. "You seem to know a lot about the subject," she observed. Victor smiled modestly. "I like what I do. At the end of the day, we're all builders of something, aren't we?" The whistle signaling the end of lunch interrupted their conversation. Clara said a quick goodbye, promising herself that she would return the next day. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of excitement about something in her routine. That night, Clara dreamed of buildings rising from the ground, transforming into magnificent structures that touched the sky. In her dream, she walked through endless corridors, always following the silhouette of a man who seemed to know all the secrets of those places. She woke up feeling strangely renewed. The casual encounters with Victor became part of Clara's routine. Within a few days, they had already developed an unlikely friendship. She was fascinated by the stories he told about the different projects he had worked on, the challenges of each construction, and the peculiarities of Brazilian architecture. "Have you ever thought about doing something different in life, Clara?" Victor asked once as they shared a cheese bread on a bench near the construction site. The question took Clara by surprise. "What do you mean?" "You don't seem very happy with your job. Your eyes don't light up when you talk about spreadsheets and balance sheets." Clara was silent for a few moments. No one had noticed this before, or at least no one had cared enough to comment. "I guess I just got comfortable," he finally admitted. "After college, I got this job and I just stayed. The years went by, and now it seems too late to change." Victor shook his head in disagreement. "It's never too late to rebuild something. Look at this building," he said, pointing to the construction site. "It was abandoned for decades, and now it's getting a new lease on life. Why should it be any different for people?" Victor's words resonated deeply with Clara. There was something about the way he saw the world that made her question her own choices and self-inflicted limitations. On a sunny Sunday, Clara received an unexpected message from Victor. He invited her to visit Parcelage, a place she had never visited before. The idea of spending a few hours with him outside of the context of the work made her anxious and excited at the same time. The meeting was revealing. Away from the work environment, Victor seemed even more at ease talking about art, history, and architecture, with a knowledge that certainly could not be acquired only as a master builder. Clara began to realize that there was much more to this man than met the eye. "How do you know so much about all this?" she asked as they observed the facade of the mansion in Parcelage. Victor hesitated briefly before answering. "I like to study. I've always been curious, and you learn a lot by moving around, talking to the right people." The answer did not completely satisfy Clara, but she chose not to insist. There was a mystery about Victor that in a way attracted her even more. As they walked through the lush gardens, Clara felt Victor's hand reach for hers, a simple gesture that made her heart race in a way it hadn't in years. Something was blossoming between them, a connection that went beyond casual friendship. For Clara, it was as if a dormant part of herself was finally awakening. Talking to Victor made her feel alive, intelligent, able to dream again. She no longer cared about the difference in worlds between an office accountant and a construction foreman. What mattered was the extraordinary person he revealed himself to be with each encounter. What Clara could not imagine was that the reality behind Victor was much more complex than anything she could have imagined. While her heart opened to that seemingly simple man, a universe of secrets was hidden behind the attentive eyes that watched her with growing affection. In an elegant apartment in the city's South Zone, Matthias Victor Anders turned off his alarm clock at 4:30 in the morning. While the city was still asleep, he began his secret routine. A quick shower, a strong cup of coffee, and then the transformation. He exchanged his silk pajamas for simple, sturdy clothes stored in a discreet compartment in his closet. He applied a special product to his hair that accentuated the grey. Hairs at his temples, his Italian shoes gave way to worn work boots. In the mirror, he observed his metamorphosis. The CEO of the construction company Horizonte, one of the largest companies in the sector in Brazil, disappeared to make way for Victor, the experienced construction foreman. He smiled at his reflection, feeling more authentic in this simplified version of himself. At 5:15 a.m., he pulled out of the garage in a simple pickup truck, a far cry from the Porsche he usually drove. This routine had begun 3 months ago when he decided to personally oversee the revitalization of the historic building in the city center, a project that meant a lot to him for reasons beyond business. "Good morning, Jonas," greeted the condominium's doorman, who believed Matthias was leaving for his morning runs. On the way to the construction site, he reflected on his double life. It wasn't just the eccentric whim of a bored businessman. Matthias felt he had lost touch with the essence of his work. Ever since he took over the construction company, after his father retired 5 years ago, he had spent his days in corporate meetings, analyzing spreadsheets and negotiating contracts. The distance between him and what was really happening on the construction sites grew larger every year. His cover story began as an experiment. He wanted to understand the real working conditions of his employees, hear their genuine complaints, see for himself the problems that never made it into the reports on his desk. But it quickly turned into something deeper, a reconnection with his original passion for construction, and unexpectedly, an escape from the pressures of being Matthias Anders, the young billionaire celebrated in business magazines. Like Victor, no one treated him with exaggerated deference. There were no tight schedules or overwhelming responsibilities. There was just honest work, sincere conversations with the workers, and recently meetings with Clara. Clara. Her face flashed through his mind, making him smile involuntarily. He hadn't planned on getting close to anyone during this experience, much less getting emotionally involved. But there was something about this woman that intrigued him, perhaps the same melancholy he felt himself, despite their very different circumstances. When he arrived at the construction site, he parked his truck a few blocks away and walked to the site. The first workers were already arriving, and Victor greeted them by name and asked about their families. This was another part of the job he enjoyed, really getting to know the people who worked for him, understanding their stories and their challenges. "So, Victor, are you going out with the girl from the office again today?" asked Chair, one of the oldest bricklayers, with a mischievous smile. Victor felt his face heat up. "We're just friends, Chair." I know. Friends who look at each other like that," the man replied, laughing and nudging other colleagues, who were joining the conversation. The truth is that Victor knew he was treading on dangerous ground. Every moment with Clara made him want to reveal the truth, but also fear her reaction. How could he explain that it all started with a lie? How would she react if she discovered that the simple construction foreman was, in reality, the owner of the company that was revitalizing the building? The day passed quickly, with Victor overseeing the work on the building's historic facade. It was a delicate job that required specific knowledge of restoration techniques. Fortunately, his years of studying architecture and engineering before he took over the company gave him the knowledge he needed to guide the team without arousing suspicion. At noon, as had become customary, he walked a little away from the construction site to find Clara. He saw her crossing the street with a shy smile on her lips. She was wearing a simple dress today, different from her formal office clothes, and she seemed more relaxed. "Hi," she said, coming closer. "I brought something for us to share today." She held out a small bag of still-warm cheese bread. "You read my mind," Victor replied, feeling that familiar warm feeling in his chest when he was near her. They walked to a nearby bench, their usual spot for lunch conversations. "How was your morning?" he asked, genuinely interested in her day. Clara sighed. "Same as everyone else. Except today I found out that the company I work for might be bought out by a larger conglomerate. Everyone's nervous about possible layoffs." Victor felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. He knew exactly which acquisition she was talking about. It was his holding company that was in the process of buying that accounting group, part of a larger business diversification strategy. "That must be hard," he commented, trying to hide his discomfort. "Are you worried?" "I should be, I suppose, but strangely I'm not. Maybe it's a sign that I really need a change in my life." She looked at him with an intensity that left him speechless for a moment. "Our conversations have made me think a lot, about what I really want, about not settling." Victor felt the weight of the irony. His words were inspiring Clara to seek change, while he himself was living an increasingly elaborate lie. "And what do you really want, Clara?" he asked, genuinely curious. She was silent for a few moments, contemplating the question. "Honestly, I don't know exactly. Maybe something that makes me feel like I'm building something meaningful like you do here." If only she knew, Victor thought. The guilt was eating away at him more and more. "Do you know what I've always wanted to do?" Clara continued with an unusual sparkle in her eyes. "Work with social housing projects, use my knowledge in administration to help communities have access to decent housing, but it seems like a dream so far from my current reality." Victor felt his heart race. Coincidentally, one of the main focuses of the Horizonte Foundation, the social arm of his company, was precisely housing projects in underprivileged communities. It was as if the universe was playing a trick on him, bringing him closer to someone who shared his most genuine ideals while keeping the abyss of his lie between them. "I don't think it's an impossible dream," he finally replied. "In fact, there are many organizations that work on this. Have you done any research?" The conversation turned to topics related to social projects in architecture and urban planning. Victor carefully shared some knowledge about existing initiatives, always taking care not to reveal his intimate familiarity with the subject. "You really know a lot for a foreman," Clara commented, her expression curious. It wasn't the first time she had noticed the inconsistencies in his story. Victor looked away. "Like I said, I like to study, and you learn a lot through practice too." Clara seemed to accept the explanation, but Victor could tell she was beginning to question her story. Sooner or later, he would have to make a decision about whether or not to reveal the truth. As they said goodbye, there was a moment of hesitation between them. Victor wanted to hug her, perhaps even kiss her, but the weight of his secret prevented him from moving forward. Clara, for her part, seemed to feel the same attraction, but she respected what she perceived to be reluctance on his part. "Same. Time tomorrow?" she asked, a hint of hope in her voice. "I'll be here," Victor promised. Back at work, Victor tried to focus on the day's tasks, but his thoughts kept returning to Clara and the dilemma he faced. The situation was becoming untenable. With each passing day, the connection between them grew deeper, and the lie became harder to maintain. Late that afternoon, Victor received a call on his personal cell phone, not the one he used as part of his cover, but the one he kept for emergencies. It was Rosa, his executive assistant. "Mr. Anders, sorry to bother you, but we have a problem with the Barra project. The urban planning secretary is demanding an urgent meeting and says he will only speak to you in person." Victor sighed. His real life was calling him back. "Make an appointment for tomorrow morning, Rosa. I'll be in the office at 9 a.m. This meant that he would not be able to be at the construction site the next day. He would have to make up an excuse for his absence, both to the workers and to Clara. The lies piled up, forming an increasingly complex web. At the end of the day, when the workers had left, Victor stayed a little longer, admiring the building under restoration. The Art Deco facade was beginning to recover its original splendor after decades of neglect. It was a work of which he was deeply proud. "Why are you doing this to yourself, Matthew?" he muttered to himself, using his real name for the first time in months in that place. He knew the answer, though. He was tired of the loneliness that came with his position. People approached Matthias Anders for what he represented: power, money, status. No one was interested in the man behind the name, his real passions, his fears, his insecurities. Like Victor, though, he found genuine connections, especially with Clara. Clara saw him, really saw him, without knowing who he was. She talked to him as an equal, sharing dreams, fears, hopes. It was a connection he had never experienced before, free from the expectations and prejudices that came with his real name. The next morning, as he dressed in one of his elegant suits for the office meeting, Matthias wondered what it would be like to meet Clara as himself, not the construction foreman Victor, but the businessman Matthias Anders. Would she look at him the same way? Would they talk about the same subjects? Would there be the same chemistry, the same honesty? These questions haunted him as he drove his Porsche through the streets of Rio de Janeiro, on his way to his real life. A life that, despite all its privileges, had never seemed as empty as it did now. Clara looked around the construction site with disappointment. There was no sign of Victor. She had waited for almost an hour during her lunch break, but he simply hadn't shown up. No message, no advance notice. His unexpected absence bothered her more than she cared to admit. Looking for Victor? The voice of Jair, one of the bricklayers who already knew her by sight, interrupted her thoughts. "Yes, we agreed to meet today," she replied, trying not to show her frustration. "He had to take care of some personal issues. He didn't come today. Didn't he tell you?" Jair seemed genuinely surprised. Clara forced a smile. "You must have forgotten. It's no problem." But there was a problem. Over the past few weeks, Victor had become an important part of her routine, an unexpected bright spot in her monotonous days. The way he made her feel alive, interesting, valued, was something she hadn't experienced in a long time. And now his sudden absence left a curious void. He returned to the office early, trying to ignore the feeling of disappointment. He focused on the spreadsheets he needed to analyze, but his mind kept returning to Victor and their conversations. "Clara, are you okay?" asked Deborah, noticing her distraction. "I am, just a little tired," she lied, turning her eyes back to the computer screen. That same afternoon, a few kilometers away, Matthias Anders was concluding a tense meeting with municipal secretaries about the Barra project. His impeccable Italian suit and confident posture revealed nothing about the double life he led, or the woman who occupied his thoughts. "Excellent presentation, Matthias," commented Rodrigo Muller, one of the company's directors, as they left the meeting room. "As always, you convinced everyone." Matthias nodded, thanking him for the compliment with a polite smile. Rodrigo was his closest friend at the company, someone he had known since college and who now held an important position at Horizonte Construction. He was also the only person who knew about his disguise as Victor. "I need to go to the project at the center this afternoon," Matthias said when they were alone in the elevator. "I've wasted the whole day here." Rodrigo looked at him with concern. "This joke of yours is going too far, don't you think? And I heard rumors that you've been seeing an employee from the accounting office next door." Matthias tensed up. "It's not a joke, Rodrigo, and yes, I've been talking to someone, but it's nothing serious." "It's nothing serious?" Rodrigo raised his eyebrows. "You, who can barely hold a conversation with the models and socialites your mother keeps introducing, are suddenly interested in an accountant who doesn't even know who you really are." The comment irritated Matthias. "Maybe that's exactly why. She talks to me, to Victor, without any ulterior motives. She's not interested in my money or my last name. And what do you think will happen when she finds out the truth? Because she will, Matthias. These kinds of lies always come to light." Rodrigo's words weighed on Matthias for the rest of the day. He knew his friend was right. The situation was becoming untenable. He had to make a decision. Either he would end this experiment once and for all, or he would tell Clara the truth and face the consequences. That night, after leaving the office, Matthias drove to the construction site in the city center. It was already after 8 o'clock and the place was deserted. Using his key, he entered the trailer that served as the construction site's office. There he changed his suit for simple clothes that he kept stored and transformed himself back into Victor. He picked up his cell phone, the one he used as Victor, and saw 3 messages from Clara. The first one asked if everything was okay, the second one said she missed him at lunch, and the last one, sent a little while ago, simply wishing him good night. He felt a wave of guilt. Did he deserve her concern? Was he being fair in harboring these feelings under a false identity? He decided to call her. Clara answered on the second ring. "Victor, is everything okay?" "Hi, Clara. Yes, everything is fine. I'm sorry I didn't show up today and didn't let you know. A personal issue came up that I needed to resolve." "I was worried," she admitted, her voice softening. "I thought maybe I'd given up on our conversations." "Never," he replied truthfully. "Our dates are the best part of my day." There was a brief silence before Clara replied, "Me too. Victor felt his heart race. "Can I make it up to you? Tomorrow is Friday. We can do something after work if you want." "I'd love to," she replied, and Victor could imagine her smile on the other end of the line. They agreed to meet at 6 in the evening in front of her office. Victor hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Part of him wanted to enjoy every moment with Clara, to delve deeper into whatever was budding between them. Another part knew that each step in that direction made the inevitable revelation more painful. On Friday, Clara left work at exactly 6, something unusual for her who usually stayed late. She was nervous and anxious at the same time. It was their first official meeting outside of lunchtime, something that clearly indicated an evolution in her relationship with Victor. He was already waiting for her, wearing jeans and a simple but clean and well-ironed shirt. He looked different from the Victor in the book, more relaxed, more at ease. "You look beautiful," he said as she approached. Clara wore a simple blue dress, but one she had chosen carefully. "Thank you," she replied, feeling herself blush like a teenager. "Where are we going?" "I thought I'd take you somewhere special to me. It's a bit far, but I think it'll be worth it. Is it okay if we take a taxi?" Clara nodded, curious. Victor constantly surprised her with his knowledge of art, architecture, and the city's history, despite his seemingly humble origins. Where would he take her this time? The taxi dropped them off in the Santa Teresa neighborhood, in front of an old building that looked like a restored colonial house, now transformed into a small restaurant. "Wow, what a charming place," Clara commented as they entered. The interior was cozy, with a few tables, soft lighting, and a decor that mixed rustic elements with touches of sophistication. A guitarist played bossa nova in a corner, creating an intimate atmosphere. To Clara's surprise, the maitre d' greeted Victor by name and led them to the best table, overlooking Guanabara Bay. "Do you come here often?" she asked, intrigued. Victor looked momentarily uncomfortable. "Sometimes the chef is an old friend." As if to confirm his words, a middle-aged man wearing a chef's uniform approached, smiling. "Victor, long time no see, friend. And I see you brought company this time." "Aaron, this is Clara," Victor introduced. "Clara, this is Aaron, the best chef in Rio and an old friend." The chef kissed Clara's hand with a theatrical gesture. "Delighted. Any friend of Victor's is welcome here. Don't worry about the menu. Today, let me prepare something special for you." When Aaron walked away, Clara looked at Victor curiously. "An old friend, how did you meet?" Victor took a sip of water before answering. "I met Aaron many years ago when he was still working as a kitchen assistant at another restaurant. I helped him renovate the place and we became friends. When he finally opened his own restaurant, I made sure to support him." The explanation seemed plausible, but Clara was beginning to notice small inconsistencies in Victor's story. The maitre d' had treated him with unusual deference for a simple construction foreman. The restaurant, although not ostentatiously luxurious, was clearly an exclusive place, frequented by people with high purchasing power. The evening continued with a series of exquisite dishes, carefully selected wines, and conversation that flowed naturally. Victor seemed genuinely interested in her life, her dreams, her opinions. It was a feeling Clara hadn't experienced in a long time, that of being truly seen by someone. "You never talk much about your family," she commented at one point. Victor paused before answering. "There's not much to say. My parents worked hard to give me an education. My father was a construction foreman, too. It was from him that I learned the trade. He passed away a few years ago. My mother lives in another city now." "I'm sorry about your father," Clara said. "Do you have any brothers?" "No, I'm an only child," he replied, subtly changing the subject. "And you? You don't talk much about your family either." Clara accepted the change of subject, telling about her parents who lived in the interior of Rio and her younger brother who studied in Sao Paulo. With each story shared, the connection between them deepened. After dinner, they walked through the charming streets of Santa Teresa. The evening was pleasant, with a gentle breeze and a sky dotted with stars, a rarity in Rio de Janeiro. At a natural viewpoint, they stopped to admire the illuminated city below. It's amazing how Rio can be so chaotic and so beautiful at the same time, Clara commented, leaning on the wall. Like life, Victor replied, approaching her, full of contradictions, imperfections, but still dazzling when seen from the right perspective. Their eyes met, and Clara felt that familiar electricity between them. Victor touched her face gently, as if asking for permission. She closed her eyes, and their lips met in a delicate kiss, which quickly deepened, expressing all the feelings they had been cultivating over the past few weeks. When they parted, Victor looked at her with a mixture of adoration and conflict that Clara couldn't fully understand. "Are you okay?" she asked, noticing his troubled expression. "I am," he replied, forcing a smile. "I just didn't expect something like this to happen in my life right now." "Neither do I," Clara admitted, still feeling the heat from the kiss. "But I'm glad it happened." Victor hugged her, and for a moment it seemed like he wanted to say something important. But the moment passed, and he just suggested that they keep walking. The following Monday, Clara arrived at work with renewed energy. The weekend had been magical. After dinner in Santa Teresa, she and Victor spent the entire Saturday together, exploring Rio's historic center, visiting exhibitions, in small galleries he knew, talking about books, films, and dreams. "Someone's in a good mood today," Deborah observed, noticing the constant smile on her friend's face. "Does it have to do with that handsome construction worker?" Clara couldn't help but blush. "Maybe." "I know. Tell. Everything. Don't hide anything." As Clara shared some details of her weekend with her friend, she heard a commotion in the office. People were crowding near the reception desk, murmuring excitedly. "What's going on?" asked Deborah. "Didn't you hear? The big boss of the construction company Horizonte is coming to visit the site today. They say he rarely appears in person at the construction sites. Everyone wants to catch a glimpse of the famous Matthias Anders." Clara did not share the general enthusiasm. She was more interested in seeing Victor at lunch, as they had agreed. Still, she approached the window with the others, driven by collective curiosity. Then she saw it. A luxurious car stopped in front of the construction site. A tall man wearing an impeccable suit got out, accompanied by other executives. When he turned to greet an employee, Clara felt her world stop. Despite the expensive suit, the perfectly groomed hair, and the imposing posture, there was no way not to recognize that face. It was Victor, her Victor, but completely transformed, unrecognizable to anyone who didn't know him closely like she did. "Is that Matthias Anders?" he asked weakly, feeling his legs tremble. "Yes, the very one," replied Deborah, excited. "Isn't he a hottie? They say he's one of the most eligible bachelors in Rio." Clara stepped back from the window, suddenly feeling dizzy. 1,000 questions exploded in her mind. Was Victor Matthias Anders the billionaire CEO of the construction company Horizonte? Why had he pretended to be a simple construction foreman? Why had he lied to her so elaborately? She felt deceived, manipulated. Every conversation, every moment together, now seemed tainted by lies. Was it all part of some cruel game? A way for him to have fun with an ordinary middle-class woman? At that moment, her cell phone vibrated with a message. It was from Victor. "No, Matthias. Can we meet for lunch today? I need to tell you something important." Clara stared at the message with teary eyes. Did he plan to tell her the truth today, or would he continue the charade when she now knew who he really was? She decided not to answer. She needed to process all of this, to understand her own feelings before confronting him. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same between them. Matthias waited anxiously in his usual spot, checking his watch every few minutes. Clara was unusually late for her. He sent another message, but there was still no response. An unsettling feeling grew in his chest. Could it be that she had discovered the truth before he could reveal it? After 40 minutes of waiting, he got his answer. Clara appeared, not with her usual warm smile, but with a hard expression he had never seen on her face. Her eyes were slightly red, as if she had been crying. "Clara," he began, rising from the bench. "I was worried." "Matthew," she interrupted, emphasizing the name bitterly. Or should I keep calling you Victor? The world seemed to slow down around him. Then she knew. All the carefully rehearsed explanations disappeared from her mind. You saw me, he stated, resigned, from the office window. Everyone was curious to see the great Matthias Anders, CEO of the construction company Horizonte. The sarcasm in his voice was cutting. Imagine my surprise when I discovered that I already knew him very well. Matthias tried to hold her hand, but she pulled away. Clara, please let me explain. Explain what exactly? Why did you pretend to be someone else? Why did you make me believe you were a simple worker, when in fact you are one of the richest men in Rio? His voice trembled, containing conflicting emotions. Was it fun to play with the feelings of an ordinary woman? Did you win some bet with your rich friends? No, Matthew felt desperate. It was never like that. Please, can we talk somewhere more private? I owe you the full truth. Clara hesitated, clearly torn between anger and curiosity. Finally, she nodded. We have 30 minutes before my break ends. Choose your words carefully. They walked in silence to a small square nearby, sitting on a bench away from passers-by. Matthias took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. It all started 3 months ago, he began. I was lost. Taking over the company after my father retired was harder than I expected. I went from being an engineer who loved being in the field to an executive stuck in endless meetings. I started to feel like I was losing touch with the essence of what we do. Building. Clara listened in silence, her face still rigid. At first, I just wanted to better understand the real challenges on construction sites, to hear from the workers without the filter of corporate reports. Victor was just a temporary experiment. He paused, looking directly into her eyes. Then I met you and everything changed. What do you mean changed? She asked, still suspicious. Like Matthias Anders. People approach me for what I have, not for who I am. Women are interested in my money, men want to do business, everyone has ulterior motives. The frustration was evident in his voice. But with you, it was different. You talked to me, to Victor, as an equal. You were interested in my ideas, not my assets. It was the first time in years that I felt a genuine connection with someone. So you kept lying, Clara concluded. Yes, he admitted, without trying to justify himself. With each passing day, it became harder to tell the truth. I was afraid of losing what we were building, but I was going to tell you today, I swear. That's why I asked you to lunch. Clara shook her head in disbelief. You think that makes it better? That you were going to tell me after weeks of lies, after... She swallowed hard, remembering the kiss, the intimate moments they had shared. I'm not seeking forgiveness, Clara. I just want you to understand that my feelings for you are real. The only thing that was fake was my name and my profession. Everything else, our conversations, our shared interests, how I feel about you, all of it is true. A heavy silence settled between them. Clara seemed to be processing everything, her face a mix of confusion, hurt, and something else that Matthias couldn't identify. You mentioned that you were interested in social housing projects, he continued, trying to reach her. Did you know that this is precisely the focus of the Horizonte Foundation? Our projects in communities... Stop, Clara interrupted, holding up her hand. Don't try to buy me off with your corporate charity work. This isn't about what you do, it's about who you are. And who you are, apparently, is someone who can construct an elaborate lie for weeks, get emotionally involved with another person under false pretenses, and think a last-minute explanation will fix everything. Matthias felt each word like a stab. The worst part was that she was right. What hurts me the most, Clara continued, her voice softer now, revealing the hurt beneath the anger, is that I really believed we had something special, that you saw something in me that other people didn't. But now, how can I trust anything you say? What I saw in you is real, Matthias insisted. Your intelligence, your compassion, your worldview, these are the qualities that attracted me, no matter if I was Victor or Matthias. Clara looked at her watch. I need to get back to work. She stood up, straightening her clothes as if she were trying to reorganize her thoughts as well. I need time, Matthias. Time to process all of this. I understand, he replied, feeling a tightness in his chest. "Can I call you later?" "No," she said firmly. "When and if I'm ready to talk, I'll come to you." With that, Clara walked away, leaving Matthias alone on the bench in the square, feeling like he had lost something precious before he even really had it. Back in the office, Clara tried to focus on the spreadsheets in front of her, but her mind was a jumble of conflicting thoughts and emotions, anger at the lie mixed with the memory of the genuine moments they had shared. Was she being unfair by judging Matthias so harshly, or was she protecting herself from someone who had started a relationship based on deceit? "Are you okay?" Deborah asked, noticing his distraction. "You look like you saw a ghost after that visit from the construction company's cat." Clara forced a smile. "I'm fine. Just a headache." How could she explain that the man everyone admired from afar was the same? One who had made her feel alive and special in recent weeks, just under a false identity. At 5 o'clock in the afternoon, as she was getting ready to leave, Clara received an unexpected visit. Rafael Costa, her childhood friend who now worked at a large company, appeared at her desk. "Rafa, what a surprise!" she exclaimed genuinely, happy to see him after almost a month of no contact. "I have a break between meetings and I thought I'd pay you a visit," he explained, hugging her. "I miss our conversations. Can we grab a coffee?" Clara agreed, grateful for the distraction. As they walked to the nearby coffee shop, Rafael commented on the movement in the building under construction. "I imagine you saw all the excitement today. Matthias Anders doesn't usually visit construction sites, but this project is special to him." Clara felt a chill. "Do you know Matthias Anders?" "The more you comment and share, the more we can bring you stories that touch your heart. Leave your name in the comments and we may include you in one of our next stories with a special greeting just for you." Rafael smiled with a certain pride. "I know quite a bit. I've been working at the construction company, Horizonte, for 2 years, remember? I'm the deputy financial director now." A fragment of the conversation with Matthias to Victor came back to Clara's mind. A childhood friend, who was also an executive at the man's company, already knew about his true identity. "Rafael," she said slowly as they sat at the cafeteria table, "did you know that Matthias Anders was posing as a worker on this construction site?" The look of surprise on Rafael's face quickly turned into one of guilty understanding. "How did you— Oh no, did he tell you?" Clara felt a new wave of betrayal. "So you knew all this time and you never told me anything?" "Wait, Carol," Rafael tried to calm her down, realizing the extent of the problem. "I knew he was doing this immersion. It's something he started a few months ago to better understand operations on the ground. But I didn't know you two knew each other, much less that you were involved." "Did he tell you about me?" she asked, her voice a mixture of anger and curiosity. Rafael hesitated. "Yes, recently. He mentioned meeting an incredible woman during his time as Victor. When he described this woman, I realized it had to be you. How many brilliant, socially minded Carolinas work in this building?" He paused, studying her expression. "But I swear I only realized the connection yesterday when he mentioned something about you working at the accounting firm. That's when I made the connection." Clara tried to absorb this new information. Rafael, her oldest friend, was also involved in this web of secrets. Why would he do that, Rafa? What kind of person pretends to be someone else to— She couldn't finish the sentence. Rafael sighed. "I've known Matthias for 2 years, Carol. He's not what the magazines paint him to be. The rich playboy, the spoiled heir. He's a brilliant, dedicated guy who really cares about the social impact of what we've built." He held her hand across the table. "And I've never heard him talk about anyone the way he talks about you. Did he tell you he was going to reveal the truth today?" "Yes, I was nervous like a teenager." Rafael smiled slightly. "I don't think it went well, judging by your reaction." "I found out earlier," Clara explained. "I saw him arriving as Matthias Anders, all-powerful in his expensive suit, while I was waiting for Victor for lunch." "Geez," Rafael muttered. "Bad way to find out." Clara felt tears forming. "I don't know what to think, Rafa. Part of me wants to understand, wants to believe there's an explanation that makes sense. Another part of me feels like I'll never be able to trust him again. Can I tell you something as a friend? Raphael waited for her to nod. The Matthew I know wouldn't do this out of spite or amusement. If he's maintained this identity for so long and fallen in love with you in the process, there must be something deeper going on. Do you think he's in love with me? The question slipped out before he could stop it. Raphael smiled. From the way he talked about you? Without a doubt. And from the way you're reacting, I think the feeling is mutual. Clara didn't answer, but she felt her heart race. Despite her anger, confusion, and hurt, she couldn't deny that what she felt, for Victor, for Matthias, was stronger than anything she had ever experienced. What do I do now? She asked, more to herself than to Raphael. Only you can decide that, he replied, but perhaps it's worth listening to what he has to say. The man who won you over didn't cease to exist just because you discovered he had a bigger bank account than you imagined. Clara thought about these words for the rest of the day. At home, she mentally replayed every moment with Victor, every conversation, every look. Had it all been a lie? Or was there enough truth to save what they were building? Meanwhile, in his penthouse apartment overlooking the sea, Matthias stared out at the illuminated city, an untouched glass of whiskey in his hand. He was certain that he had lost Clara forever. The look of disappointment and betrayal on her face during that conversation in the square continued to haunt him. His cell phone rang, his personal one, not the one he used as Victor. It was Rodrigo. How was it? Asked the friend without preamble. A disaster, Matthew replied. She found out before I could tell her. She saw me arriving at the site as myself. Damn, Rodrigo muttered. What now? Now. Matthew looked down at the city, feeling a void his wealth could not fill. Now I wait, she asked for time. It's the least I can give her. What Matthias didn't know was that, at that very moment, Clara was rereading the messages they had exchanged, examining photos they had taken together, and trying to reconcile the two versions of the man who had stolen her heart. Victor, the simple and profound construction foreman, and Matthias Anders, the powerful businessman who had hidden behind a disguise to find something genuine in a world of appearances. A week passed without Clara responding to Matthias's messages. He respected her request for space, limiting himself to a single text a day, not insistent, just to remind her that he was thinking of her, waiting for her. This time, Clara immersed herself in work, trying to fill the void she felt with spreadsheets and reports. Her conversations with Raphael became more frequent, as he was the only one with whom she could share the complexity of her emotions. He sent another message today, Clara said as they ate lunch together. He said the Horizon Foundation is launching a new housing project in the suburbs, and he'd like to hear my ideas. Raphael smiled. He's really trying to reach out to you because of what you have in common. Or you're trying to impress me with your power and money, she countered, albeit without much conviction. Carol, Raphael set his cutlery down on the table, looking at her seriously. I've known you since we were kids. You've always been an idealist, always wanted to make a difference, and now there's someone with the resources and influence to turn your ideas into reality, someone who clearly values your perspective and intelligence. Are you really going to throw that away for pride? Clara sighed. Raphael was right, but the situation was more complex than it seemed. It's not just pride, Rafa. It's about trust. How can I build something real with someone who started our relationship with such an elaborate lie? People make mistakes, Carol, especially when they're trying to escape the expectations the world places on them. Raphael paused. Besides, have you ever considered that maybe Victor is more authentic than the Matthias the world knows? That maybe he showed you a part of himself that few people have access to? This prospect had never occurred to Clara. Could it be that, paradoxically, the false identity had allowed Matthew to be more truthful with her? That same afternoon, his boss gathered all the employees for an important announcement. The acquisition by the financial conglomerate had been finalized, and structural changes would begin immediately. Unfortunately, there will be a significant restructuring, he announced, looking visibly uncomfortable. Some departments will be merged, others will be moved to headquarters. Approximately 30% of current positions will be eliminated. A nervous murmur ran through the room. Clara felt her stomach sink. She had only been with the company for 7 years, not enough to guarantee stability during a restructuring of this magnitude. Her fears were confirmed 2 days later when she was called into the HR director's office. With a rueful expression, he informed her that her position was among those that would be eliminated. She would be given a month's notice and adequate severance, but after that, she would be unemployed. Clara left the meeting stunned. 7. Years of dedication ended with a 15-minute conversation. As she walked back to her desk, she noticed that Deborah was crying quietly. Apparently, she had also received the news. "What are we going to do now?" asked Deborah between sobs. Clara had no answer. At 32, with a competitive job market and an unstable economy, the prospect of finding a new job with an equivalent salary was daunting. When he got home, he allowed himself to cry for the first time. The impending unemployment, coupled with the emotional turmoil over Matthias, seemed like an impossible burden to bear. After a few hours of self-pity, however, a new determination began to emerge. He couldn't control what had happened, but he could decide how to react to it. With a deep sigh, he picked up his cell phone and did what he had avoided doing for days. He called Matthias. He answered on the first ring. "Clara?" "Hi," she replied, surprised at her own calm. "Can we talk?" "Of course," his voice revealed both relief and anxiety. "When? Where?" "Now. At Parcelage." The location of their first real meeting seemed appropriate for this conversation. An hour later, Clara spotted Matthias sitting on the same bench where they had spoken weeks earlier. He was wearing jeans and a simple shirt, more like Victor, than the powerful CEO she had seen visiting the construction site. This deliberate choice did not go unnoticed. "Thank you for coming," he said as she approached. His eyes revealed sleepless nights. Clara sat down, keeping some distance. "I've decided we need to talk, clear things up." "I'm listening," Matthew replied, giving her control of the conversation. Clara gathered her thoughts before she began. "First, I want you to understand why I was so hurt. It wasn't just because you hid who you were, but because you created an intimacy based on a false premise. You got to know parts of me that few people know, while keeping your true identity hidden." Matthew nodded, accepting the criticism. "You're absolutely right, it was unfair and selfish of me. That said," she continued, "I've been thinking a lot about everything we've been through, about the conversations we've had, the things we've shared." She paused, gathering her courage. "And I've come to the conclusion that, despite the lie about your identity, what happened between us was real. At least it was for me." "For me too," Matthew said fervently. "More real than anything I've ever experienced. Clara, when I'm with you, I'm not pretending to be someone else. I'm finally being myself, without the expectations and pressures that come with my name and position." Clara allowed herself a small smile. Raphael said something similar. That maybe Victor is more authentic than the Matthias the world knows. "Raphael has always been perceptive," Matthias commented, also smiling. "And he's right. With you, as Victor, I was able to be genuine in a way that I rarely can be, as Matthias." And as a comfortable silence settled between them, the forgiveness wasn't complete, but it was a start. "There's something else I need to tell you," Clara said finally. "I lost my job. The company was bought out and they're eliminating a bunch of positions. I have another month before my notice. Period ends." Matthias looked genuinely dismayed. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I know how much you've dedicated yourself to this work, even though it's not your passion. The funny thing is, despite the initial shock, I'm not as devastated as I expected," she admitted. "Maybe it's a sign that I need a change. To find something that really inspires me." Matthias hesitated before speaking. "Can I make a suggestion? No pressure, just an idea." Clara nodded, curious. "The Horizon Foundation is really starting a large housing project in the suburbs. We're looking for someone with administrative experience, to coordinate the financial and operational aspects. He looked her straight in the eye. Your accounting knowledge combined with your passion for social projects would be a perfect fit for the position. Clara felt a mixture of interest and caution. Matthias, I don't want a job out of charity or because we're personally involved. It's not charity, he said. It's recognition of talent. And to be absolutely transparent, the selection process would be conducted by Rosa, the director of the foundation. I wouldn't interfere. If you get the position, it will be on your own merit. The proposal was tempting. It was exactly the kind of job Clara had always dreamed of, using her administrative skills to make a real difference in people's lives. I'll think about it, he finally replied, but I appreciate the suggestion. They continued talking for hours, slowly rebuilding the connection they had developed, now on a more honest basis. Clara still had reservations, but she could not deny that the feelings she had for him, whether as Victor or as Matthias, remained intense. The following week, after much thought, Clara decided to send her resume to the Horizonte Foundation. As promised, Matthias stayed away from the selection process. After 2 demanding interviews with Rosa and other members of the team, Clara was selected for the position. You made it on your own merit, Rosa assured us in the call announcing the approval. Your experience and above all, your vision on how to integrate financial aspects with the social objectives of the projects was what convinced us. On her last day at the accounting office, Clara was cleaning her desk when she received an unexpected visitor. Matthias, dressed in an impeccable suit, caused a stir when he entered the place looking for her. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised and a little embarrassed by the attention they were receiving. "I came to pick you up for lunch on your last day," he replied with a smile. "Unless you'd rather keep our relationship a secret." Clara noticed the shocked and envious looks from her colleagues, especially Deborah, whose mouth was literally open in surprise. "I think it's a little late for secrets now," she replied, picking up her bag. "Just give me a minute to say goodbye to everyone." As they walked out of the building, Clara couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction at the stunned expression on her former boss's face. Matthew Anders, the billionaire who had been featured in the business magazines, had personally come to pick her up for lunch. "You did that on purpose," she commented as they got into the luxury car that was waiting for them. Matthias smiled, a slightly mischievous expression that reminded her a lot of the Victor she had known. "Maybe a little. I thought you deserved a triumphant exit after 7 years." Clara laughed, feeling a lightness she hadn't experienced in weeks. Life had taken an unexpected turn, and there were still many challenges ahead. Her relationship with Matthias would need time to fully heal. The transition to a new job would be demanding. But for the first time in a long time, she felt like she was heading in the right direction. What Clara didn't know was that they would soon face a much greater challenge that would test not only their newly rebuilt relationship, but also the construction company, Horizonte itself, and everything Matthias had built over the years. That same afternoon, while they were having lunch at a discreet restaurant, Rodrigo called Matthias with alarming news. "We need to talk urgently," he said, his voice tense. "I've just discovered serious irregularities in the contracts in the northern region. It appears someone has been diverting significant funds from the projects." Matthias felt his blood run cold. Horizonte Construction had always been a principle of transparency and integrity in its business dealings. The idea that someone within the company was involved in fraud was devastating. "I'm going to the office now," he replied, hanging up the phone with a serious expression. "Did something serious happen?" Clara asked, noticing his change in mood. Matthew hesitated. They were just beginning to rebuild trust between them. Should he share this problem or shield her from yet another worry? "Yes," he finally decided. "A serious problem at the company that I need to resolve immediately." He paused, making a decision. "And I'd like you to come with me." Clara looked surprised. "Me? Why?" "Because I trust your judgment," he replied sincerely. "And because I promised not to hide anything important from you anymore. This is my real life with real problems. And if we're going to try to build something together, I want you to know every aspect of it, the good and the challenging." The raw honesty in his words touched Clara deeply. This was a Matthias few knew. Vulnerable, human, seeking support in a difficult time. "Come on," she said, standing up. "You've shown me your world as Victor. Now it's time to see the world of Matthias Anders." As they left the restaurant, Clara had no idea that she was about to become involved in a situation that would change not only her view of Matthias, but also her own capabilities and the impact she could have on the world. The imposing Horizonte construction company building stood like a monument of glass and steel on the avenue. Clara felt intimidated as she entered the luxurious lobby, a world away from the modest office where she had worked for 7 years. Employees greeted Matthias with deference as they passed, some casting curious glances at the unknown woman beside him. "Nervous?" Matthias asked as they got on the private elevator that led directly to the presidency. "A little," Clara admitted. "It's strange to see this side of your life." "Remember one thing," he said, holding out her hand. "This building, this company, are just structures. What really matters are the people and the values we stand for." On the 30th floor, they were greeted by Rosa, the same woman who had interviewed Clara for the position at the foundation. She greeted Matthias formally, but her gaze revealed concern. "Rodrigo is in the conference room with the documents," she said. "The situation seems more serious than we initially thought." Matthias introduced Clara briefly. "Clara will be joining the foundation next week, but I have invited her to participate in this meeting. I have complete confidence in her discretion and perspective." Rosa looked momentarily surprised, but nodded respectfully. "Welcome, Clara. We'll need all the bright minds to solve this situation." In the meeting room, Rodrigo was waiting for them with piles of documents and an open laptop. Raphael was also present, his tense expression contrasting with his usual good mood. "Carol," Raphael exclaimed, surprised to see her, "I didn't expect to find you here." "Mateus invited me," she explained simply, aware of the curious looks from the others present. "Let's get to the point," Mateus interrupted, naturally assuming the leadership position. "Rodrigo, what exactly did we discover?" Rodrigo pointed to the documents spread out on the table. "In the last 18 months, approximately 15 million was diverted from 3 major projects in the North region. The money came out of official budgets but never reached suppliers or local teams." "How is this possible?" Matthias asked, visibly disturbed. "We have verification protocols, regular audits. Someone with deep knowledge of our systems was able to create a sophisticated shell company structure," Raphael explained. "Payments were authorized for legitimate suppliers, but redirected at the last moment." Clara, who had been watching silently, noticed a pattern in the documents on display. She asked permission to take a closer look at some of the financial spreadsheets. "Can I?" he asked, pointing to the laptop. Rodrigo hesitated, looking at Matthias, who nodded. Clara began to analyze the data with eyes trained by years of meticulous work with numbers and transactions. After a few minutes of tense silence, she looked up. "All of the fraudulent transactions have one thing in common. They were always processed on the same day of the month, the 23rd, and always after 6 p.m., when most of the finance team had already left." Raphael leaned forward to look at the data. "You're right. How did we not notice this before?" "Because you were looking for outliers or suspicious suppliers," Clara explained. "But the scheme is more sophisticated. The amounts are consistent with the approved budgets, only the final destination is changed." Matthias watched Clara with growing admiration. Her ability to identify patterns in complex data was impressive. "There's more," she continued, pointing to another spreadsheet. "All these projects have the same administrative manager, Carlos Muller." A heavy silence fell over the room. Carlos was a long-time respected employee who had worked at the company since Matthias's father's time. "That doesn't prove anything," Rodrigo argued. "Carlos oversees dozens of projects." "True," Clara agreed. "But if we cross-reference that, data with the system authorizations," she typed quickly, accessing another set of information. "On the 23rd, after 6 p.m., Carlos's login is the only one active in the system for senior management." Matthias exchanged meaningful glances with Rodrigo and Raphael. The evidence clearly pointed to Carlos, but the idea that such a long-time and trusted employee could be involved in fraud was hard to accept. We need more evidence before we make any accusations, Mateus decided. Rafael, I want a full and discreet audit of all the projects Carlos has overseen over the past 2 years. Rodrigo, prepare a report for our lawyers, but keep it strictly confidential for now. Clara watched the dynamic between them, impressed by Matthias's calm and clarity in such a delicate situation. This was a side of him she had never seen before, the determined leader, the executive responsible for thousands of jobs and million-dollar projects. What about the current projects? Rosa asked. The one for the Alemão community is scheduled to start in 2 weeks. We cannot delay, Mateus said. Hundreds of families depend on this project. We need to ensure that no resources are diverted while we investigate. That's when Clara had an idea. What if we implemented a new verification protocol specifically for this project, something that Carlos doesn't know about and can't manipulate? Everyone turned to her, interested. The current problem is that the system allows changes to payment recipients even after initial approval, she explained. We could create a parallel final confirmation process using new software that requires two-factor authentication. The suggestion was brilliant in its simplicity. Rafael immediately began discussing how to implement the idea, while Rodrigo considered the legal aspects. Mateus watched the scene with a mixture of pride and gratitude. Clara not only understood the problem, but was already thinking of practical solutions. In a moment of crisis, when his company and its reputation were threatened, she was by his side, offering not only emotional support, but intelligence and competence. The meeting stretched into the afternoon and into the evening. Together, they devised a detailed plan. They would discreetly monitor Carlos's activities while implementing new security protocols to protect the projects underway. The suburban housing project would be a test bed for the new system, with Clara working directly with the information security team to implement the additional checks. When they finally finished, it was past midnight. Rosa and Rodrigo said goodbye, exhausted but determined. Rafael stayed behind, watching Clara and Mateus with a discreet smile. You guys make a good team, he commented, preparing to leave. I always knew you were brilliant, Carol, but today, you really impressed everyone. When they were alone in the meeting room, Mateus approached Clara, taking her hands in his. Thank you, he said sincerely. Not just for your help today, but for being here, for giving me a second chance. Clara smiled, tired but satisfied. I think I'm finally getting to know the real Matthew, not the billionaire from the magazines, nor the master builder in disguise, but the man behind both. He gently pulled her into a hug, and she allowed herself to relax in his arms, feeling like they were finally building something authentic. Over the next few weeks, Clara threw herself headlong into her new challenges. During the day, she worked at the Horizonte Foundation, coordinating the financial aspects of the suburban housing project. At night, she often stayed late with the investigation team, helping to track the embezzlement scheme and strengthen systems against future fraud. Her integration into the foundation was surprisingly smooth. Rosa, who was initially reserved, soon recognized her talent and dedication. Her colleagues, who might have viewed her with suspicion because of her relationship with Matthias, respected her work ethic and her substantial contributions. The suburban project became his passion. It was not just a real estate development, but a comprehensive initiative that included a community center, educational spaces and basic infrastructure for one of Rio's most deprived areas. Will this place be called Horizonte Community Center? Asked Clara during a visit to the site, accompanied by Matthias and the team of architects. Actually, Matthias replied, I was thinking of something different. What do you think of rebuild space? Clara smiled, understanding the reference to their first conversations as Clara and Victor when they talked about rebuilding lives and abandoned buildings. Perfect, she approved, feeling thrilled to see how her informal conversations were turning into something concrete, capable of positively impacting the lives of hundreds of people. As the project progressed, so did the internal investigation. The evidence against Carlos Mueller became increasingly compelling. The double-checking system implemented by Clara successfully blocked 3 attempts at diversion in other projects within the company, confirming her suspicions. The confrontation with Carlos was inevitable. In a tense meeting, Mateos, accompanied by the company's lawyers and Rodrigo, presented the evidence. The man, after initially denying it, finally confessed, revealing that he had started embezzling funds to pay for expensive medical treatments for his wife with cancer, but had then been unable to stop. "You've disappointed me deeply, Carlos," Mateos said, the pain evident in his voice. "My father trusted you like few others. If you had told us about your medical problems, we would have helped." The situation was resolved internally, with Carlos agreeing to cooperate in returning the funds and accepting the legal consequences of his actions. Mateos, despite the betrayal, assured that Carlos's wife would continue to receive medical assistance through the company's foundation. This resolution, although painful, further strengthened Mateos's reputation among the employees as a fair and humane leader. Clara, who watched from afar how he handled the situation, felt her admiration for him grow. 1 month after the project began in the suburbs, the first results were already visible. The community, initially suspicious, began to actively get involved. The participatory construction model proposed by Clara, in which the residents themselves contributed ideas and work, created a sense of belonging and shared responsibility. "You have completely transformed the approach to this project," Mateos said, as they watched a meeting with community leaders. "We are building much more than just houses." "We're building trust," Clara added. "Something I've learned recently is how important it is, and how it can be rebuilt even after it's been broken." The look they exchanged was loaded with meaning. Their own story of trust broken and rebuilt became a parallel to the work they were doing in the community. One afternoon, while they were supervising the start of construction on the community center, Clara noticed something curious. Mateos, dressed simply for the visit to the construction site, was chatting animatedly with the workers, asking about their families and listening to their suggestions on construction details. "You never stopped being Victor, did you?" she asked, when they were alone. Mateos smiled. "Victor is part of who I am, maybe the best part. What I learned during those months, the connections I made with the workers, changed my outlook on a lot of things. Including about me," she added. "Especially about you," he confirmed, holding her hand. "Victor found you, but it's Mateos who has the privilege of loving you every day." The words hung between them, the first time the word love had been explicitly mentioned. Clara felt her heart race, but before she could respond, they were interrupted by Raphael, who brought urgent news about a problem with the supply of materials. The intimate moment faded, but the words stayed with Clara for the rest of the day. As she drove home that evening, she reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past few months, from frustrated accountant to coordinator of a transformative social project, from lonely woman to partner with a complex and fascinating man, who had turned out to be much more than his fortune or position. What had started as a lie had become something profoundly true. And as Espacio Reconstruir took shape in the suburbs, Clara and Mateos were also building something together, a relationship based not on illusions or expectations, but on mutual understanding, respect, and, yes, love. That night, looking at the model of the project in her apartment, Clara made a decision. It was time to take the next step. She didn't know exactly what the future held for them, but she was sure that she wanted to build it. Alongside Mateos, the man who, under different names and appearances, had won her heart and transformed her life. 6 months had passed since the suburban project began. What had begun as a housing initiative had become a revolutionary model of community development that was attracting national attention. Espacio Reconstruir was not just a housing complex, but a living ecosystem of opportunities. Vocational training workshops, a library, a daycare center, a primary healthcare center, and carefully designed community spaces. Clara watched with pride as the children played on the newly opened playground. Her hair, now shorter and streaked with sun-kissed gold, swayed in the afternoon breeze, as she chatted with Donna Zaria, one of the community leaders who had become her friend and advisor. "You know, my daughter, when you came here talking about building houses, I thought it was just another promise that would come to nothing," the 70-year-old woman confessed, her dark eyes shining with wisdom. "We've seen a lot of important people come here, take pictures and then disappear." Clara smiled, understanding the community's initial distrust. "And what made you change your mind?" "That's when I saw you and Mr. Matthias here every single weekend, getting your hands dirty with us." "Rich people don't usually get their hands dirty," replied Donna Zaria with her characteristic frankness, "and also the way you really listened to us, without pretending to know what was best for us." The mention of Matthias warmed Clara's heart. He had dedicated himself personally to the project, breaking with the tradition of CEOs who manage remotely. At least once a week, he would dress in simple clothes, very similar to those he had worn when he was Victor, and actively participate in the construction, knowing each resident by name. "Matthias learned a lot about construction from his father," Clara commented, keeping the full story of Victor's disguise under wraps. "He really values hands-on work." "And he values you very much too," Donna Zaria observed with a sly smile. "I've never seen a man look at a woman the way he looks at you, as if you were water in the desert." Clara blushed slightly. Her relationship with Matthias had deepened over the months. They worked together, dreamed together, and 3 months ago they had decided to live together. To the surprise of many, they did not choose Matthias's luxurious penthouse, but a comfortable but modest apartment in Laranjeiras, a symbolic decision to build something new that was neither entirely his world nor entirely hers. "He's a special man," he replied simply. "And when is the wedding coming?" the lady asked with the naturalness of someone who has the right to ask personal questions. "You're not getting any younger, you know, and you need children to continue this beautiful work you've started." Clara laughed at Donna Zaria's bluntness. "One thing at a time. Let's finish this project first." "Life doesn't wait for a project to finish, my daughter. Life happens while we do other things." The lady's simple but profound words stayed with Clara for the rest of the day. In fact, while she dedicated herself to the reconstruir space, her life with Matthias had blossomed in unexpected ways. The wounds from the initial lie were completely healed, replaced by an intimacy and complicity that surprised them both. That night, Clara arrived at the apartment exhausted but satisfied. She found Matthias on the balcony, contemplating the partial view of Christ the Redeemer in the distance, a glass of wine in his hand and a thoughtful expression. "Hi," she greeted, hugging him from behind. "You're early today." Matthias turned, kissing her softly. "I cancelled the last meeting. I needed time to think." Something in his tone alerted Clara. "Did something happen?" "I received an interesting proposal today," he replied, leading her to sit next to him. "An international group wants to buy the construction company Horizonte. They offered a value well above the market." Clara felt a tightness in her chest. The construction company was Matthias's family legacy, the company his father had built from scratch. "And what do you think about that?" Matthias took a sip of wine before answering. "At first I refused right away. The company is part of who I am, part of my family's history." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "But then I started thinking about everything we've been through in the last few months, the work we've done in the suburbs, and I asked myself, what if we could do more? Like this? The proposal includes keeping me as a consultant for 2 years with a minority stake. I would continue to be involved, but without the daily responsibilities of CEO. And we would have enough capital to transform the Horizonte Foundation into something much larger, with autonomy to develop projects throughout the country. Clara processed the information, realizing the implications. It was a radical change, but also an extraordinary opportunity. "What does the foundation mean to you?" she asked, wanting to understand his deeper motivations. Matthias smiled, grateful for her insight. "That's always been what I've loved most about my job. The construction company builds buildings for privileged people, like myself. The foundation builds futures for those who really need them." His eyes shone with genuine enthusiasm. Can you imagine expanding the Espacio Reconstruir model to 10 or 20 different communities, creating a research and innovation institute for social housing, training young people from the communities themselves in architecture and engineering? Clara was captivated by his vision. This was the Matthias she loved, the man who, despite all his privileges, saw beyond his own world and dreamed of making a real difference. "It seems you've already made your decision," she observed with a smile. "Almost," he replied, surprising her by getting up and going to his room. He returned moments later with a small carved wooden box in his hands. "But there is one fundamental condition for that to happen." Clara looked curiously at the box, which he placed on the table between them. "Over the past few months, I've realized something important," Matthias continued, his voice soft but firm. "Every project that has truly mattered in my life has happened with you. You've shown me a different way of seeing the world, of connecting with people, of finding purpose beyond conventional success." He opened the box, revealing not a ring, as Clara had expected, but a small miniature replica of the rebuild space, meticulously carved from wood. In the center of the model, where the main square had been, was a tiny pedestal with something shiny on it. "I don't just want to build buildings or even communities," Matthew said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to build a life with you, Clara, a life with purpose, with meaning." Gently, he removed the shiny object from the model, a white gold ring with a modest but perfectly cut stone. "Will you do me the honor of marrying me?" Clara felt tears in her eyes, moved not only by the proposal but by the way he had made it, symbolizing the union of their personal and professional dreams, of their individual lives and the greater purpose they had found together. "Yes," she replied simply, holding out her hand for him to place the ring on. "But on one condition." Matthias raised his eyebrows, curious. "Let the wedding be simple, no extravagances or grand events. To impress the local society, something intimate, meaningful, that reflects who we really are." Matthias's smile lit up his face. "I was thinking the exact same thing, actually." He hesitated, as if gathering his courage. "What do you think about getting married at Espacio Reconstruir? When it's completely finished, as a celebration not only of our union, but of everything we've built together." The idea was unexpected but perfect. A wedding in the heart of the community that had become so important to both of them, surrounded not only by friends and family, but by the people whose lives had been transformed by the project. "Donna Zaria will be ecstatic," laughed Clara, imagining the reaction of the lady who had asked her about marriage that very afternoon. She practically predicted it today. Matthias joined in her laughter, pulling her into a hug. "That lady has a sixth sense. Last week, when we were working on finishing the library, she asked me if I had gotten the courage to ask you to marry me, or was I still stalling?" Embracing themselves on the balcony, looking out over the city they loved, Clara and Matthias began planning not only their wedding, but the next chapter of their lives. The decision to sell the construction company and expand the foundation was a risky one, but they both felt it was the right path. Together, they had found a greater purpose that transcended individual careers or personal ambitions. 3 months. Later, Espacio Reconstruir was officially opened. The project, initially planned to benefit 200 families, had grown to serve almost 500, becoming a national benchmark in sustainable community development. The opening ceremony attracted authorities, the press, and most importantly, hundreds of residents proud of their new home. In his speech, Matthias surprised everyone by announcing the sale of the construction company Horizonte and the creation of the Reconstruir Institute, an independent organization dedicated to replicating the model in other communities in Brazil. At his side, Clara introduced the first 5 young people from the community, who would receive full scholarships to study engineering and architecture, ensuring that knowledge and opportunities would continue to circulate. What no one but those closest to the event knew was that, after the official speeches and the departure of the authorities, there would be another ceremony at the same location. At dusk, when the sun painted the sky of Rio de Janeiro with orange tones, a small group gathered in the central square of the Reconstruir space. Donna Zaria, dressed in her best blue dress, sniffed excitedly as she adjusted the simple flower arrangement in Clara's hair. "I told you it wouldn't take long," she said with satisfaction. "You two go together like coffee and cheese bread." Clara, wearing a simple but elegant white dress, laughed at the culinary comparisons, served the lady who had become almost like a grandmother to her in recent months. Rosa, now a close friend and not just a colleague, was putting the finishing touches on her light makeup. In the center of the square, Mateus waited anxiously, wearing not a formal suit, but dress pants and a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves, a look that combined elements of both Victor and Matthias, as if symbolizing the complete integration of the different facets of his personality. Raphael, as best man, was nervously checking to make sure he hadn't forgotten the rings. Rodrigo was talking to the local musicians who would be playing during the ceremony, young talents from the community itself, some of whom had found their calling in the cultural workshops at Espacio Reconstruir. When Clara walked up to Mateus, proudly led by her father, who had come from the countryside for the occasion, there was no red carpet or lavish decorations. There were just real people, genuine smiles, and the warmth of a community that had become part of their story. The celebrant, a justice of the peace who was a friend of Matthias's family, conducted a simple and moving ceremony. When the time came to say the vows, Matthias held Clara's hands, looking deeply into her eyes. "Clara, when we met, I was lost in my own life, hiding behind a persona because I feared no one could love the real man behind the name and fortune. You not only accepted me when you discovered the truth, but you helped me reconcile all the parts of myself." Her voice shook slightly. "I promise to always be authentic with you, to build each day of our future with honesty, respect, and love. I promise to never forget that the true foundations of a life are not made of concrete and steel, but of trust and commitment renewed with each dawn." With tears in her eyes, Clara replied, "Matthias, our beginnings were unusual, but perhaps they needed to be that way for us to find something truly special. You have shown me that it is never too late to rebuild, whether it is an abandoned building, a forgotten community, or a heart hesitant to believe in love." She smiled, squeezing his hands. "I promise to walk alongside you in every project, every dream, every challenge. I promise to always remember that the most beautiful and lasting structures are those that we build together, with patience, creativity, and above all, love." As they exchanged rings and were declared husband and wife, the sun set over the Rio de Janeiro horizon, casting a final golden ray over the couple and the assembled community. The party that followed was simple but lively, with food prepared by the residents themselves, music that mixed samba and bossa nova, and dancing that lasted into the night. At one point, Clara and Mateus briefly stepped away from the celebration, going up to the terrace of the community center to admire the view of the city and the neighborhood they had helped transform. "Look what we've built," Clara said, pointing to the lights coming on in the new houses, to the children still playing in the illuminated square, to the young people rehearsing a dance performance in the open-air amphitheater. "And this is just the beginning," Matthias replied, hugging her. "The Reconstruir Institute has already identified 3 other communities where we can implement similar projects. And with the young people we are training, in a few years we will have teams led by people from the communities themselves." Clara smiled, leaning against him. "Do you know what Donna Zaria told me today? That we should think about having children soon to continue the work." Matthias laughed, but his eyes revealed that the idea was not unpleasant to him. "And what do you think of that?" "I think she's right, as always," Clara replied, turning to face him. "I think it would be beautiful to expand our family as we expand the project, to raise children who understand from an early age the value of building bridges between different worlds, of using privilege to create opportunities for others." Matthias kissed her softly, his heart overflowing with love and gratitude. "You gave me so much more than a purpose, Clara. You gave me a home, not an address or a building, but a place of true belonging. We built this home together," she corrected gently, "and we'll keep building it one day at a time." Hand in hand, they returned to the party, to the music, to the celebration not only of their love, but of a shared vision of a world where differences do not create barriers, but foundations for bridges of understanding and opportunity. And so, between the concrete and the dreams, between the simplicity and the sophistication, between the past of lies and the future of truths, Clara and Matthias found their own space to rebuild, not only houses and communities, but lives, including their own. Have you signed up yet? Do it now and tell us which city you're following us from.